Being a bulldog is a full-time job. You don't just lie around waiting for the kibble to fall from the sky. No, you work for it. And at night, when the world gets suspiciously quiet and shadows creep around my home, it's game time. For me, Frank, proud, slightly squished-faced defender of apartment 3B, it's a personal mission to keep danger away from Henry. That's my owner. He's a guy in his 30s, works at some office for hours on end while I fend off intruders from our little corner in Brooklyn. Now, if you've never been a dog, you probably don't get why we take the night so seriously. But let me explain. The night is no time for relaxation. Every bark, every growl, every jump off the couch, it's calculated. A sniff of caution, a glare of suspicion. I sense things that Henry wouldn't dream of. Some call it instinct. I call it my job. Sure, he works in insurance, but the real insurance policy here is me. Now, Henry's a good guy, but clueless sometimes. He doesn't get it when I start barking at nothing in the dead of night. Nothing? Please. There's no such thing as nothing in the dark. Trust me, I know what's out there. I've been blessed, or cursed, with the all-seeing nose. And here's the kicker. Humans have no clue. They have this tragic blindness to the eerie stuff hiding in shadows, the faintest scent of something wrong on the breeze. Henry just shrugs it off and tells me to quiet down. Little does he know, if it weren't for me, we'd be knee-deep in trouble by now. So you want to know why we dogs get all bent out of shape at night? It's not because we're trying to drive you insane with barking. We just know things. Like last Tuesday night, for instance. It was late, around midnight, the sort of hour when any sensible human should be asleep, but not me. Henry had dozed off on the couch after another one of those one last episode marathons he loves, leaving me wide awake and staring into the dark. I'd heard a strange noise, a sort of scuffing sound, like something brushing up against the door down the hall. My ears perked up immediately. This wasn't a settling of the building noise. This was different. My tail went stiff, and I felt that low growl bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. Henry was snoring, completely oblivious, which only irritated me more. I could feel the tension building in my paws. What if it was someone creeping around out there? Or worse, something. In Brooklyn, you don't take chances. I hopped off the couch, carefully, without waking Henry, and padded over to the door. Nose to the crack, I took a big sniff. Oh yeah. There was something there, all right. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's probably nothing. But nothing doesn't reek like sweat and leftover pizza. And nothing doesn't make me feel like my heart's about to pound right out of my fur. Nope, I was sure of it. Someone was standing right on the other side, possibly casing the place. I let out a growl, low and serious. If it was a threat, I wanted them to know they weren't getting past me. Henry, of course, mumbled something in his sleep. Something like, "Quiet down, Frank." Typical. But I wasn't about to back down. I growled louder with purpose. That's when I heard the footsteps shuffle away, faint but distinct, moving down the hallway. Success. Whoever it was had decided to find easier prey. I sat there for a few minutes, ears on high alert, just to make sure they were really gone. That's the thing with us dogs. We don't need to see danger to feel it. When the air thickens, when the silence gets too tense, I know something's not right. Henry might think I'm just being paranoid, but I'd rather be paranoid than let some stranger get the drop on us. Plus, I've been around long enough to know that half the time when I growl at something, it's because there's really something to growl about. I felt a smug sense of satisfaction as I trotted back to the couch, settling down next to Henry. He'd never know how close we'd come to a potential disaster, or at least an awkward confrontation in the hallway. But that's the thankless life of a bulldog on night watch. Here's the deal with barking at night. To Henry, it probably sounds like I'm losing my mind, but to me, it's simple math. Strange sound plus strange smell equals possible threat. Henry calls it overreacting. I call it not wanting to be ambushed by a pizza-smelling intruder. And believe me, I'm not about to apologize. Take last Friday night, for instance. We'd just settled in after Henry's night out. He went to one of those rooftop bars that I'm apparently not allowed at. Whatever. He came back late, smelling of cheap cologne and bourbon, so I knew he was out with his cool friends. He barely got his shoes off before collapsing onto the bed, leaving me to handle night duty alone once again. Around 3 a.m., just when I'd finally managed to drift off, I heard it, a faint click, and then the unmistakable sound of a door creaking somewhere outside. My heart skipped. I bolted upright, ears twitching, scanning the room with laser focus. My first thought? No way I'm letting anyone mess with us tonight. Henry, though, was snoring like a freight train. So what do? I bark. Not just a casual woof, either. This was the full-throttle back-off bark, the kind that shakes windows and probably makes neighbors curse my name. But do I care? Not a bit. It's a price worth paying to keep us safe. As soon as I started barking, I heard whoever was out there freeze. The footsteps stopped dead. That's when I really let loose, a low, guttural growl, just to drive the point home. After a few seconds of pure silence, the steps started up again, retreating this time. Another crisis averted. The funny thing is, Henry doesn't even wake up. He just rolls over, mumbles something about crazy dog, and keeps snoring. If only he knew. Humans think they're the ones protecting us, but the truth is, without me, he'd be sitting in an empty apartment with no one to bark off the real dangers. But that's a bulldog's life, I guess, keeping the ship afloat while everyone else snores away, oblivious. I may be squat and stocky, but when I bark, the world listens. You might think Brooklyn would be familiar after years of patrols, but no. This place holds more secrets than a dog's nose can count. There's an alley around the corner from our building, one that always gives me the creeps. It's narrow, shadowed, and reeks of things best left unnamed. Henry and I walk past it every day, but at night, it's different. The smells linger longer, richer, with a hint of something foul beneath. Every time I pass, my fur bristles. That alley hides something. I just know it. One night, Henry decided to take me out for a late-night stroll, which usually means he's trying to clear his head. Fine by me. I get to sniff around, maybe pee on a lamppost or two. But that night, he decided to head right past the alley. Now, I'm no scaredy cat, but even I have my limits. The minute we got near it, my legs froze. Nope, not going, not tonight. Henry tugged on the leash, muttering, "Come on, Frank, what's with you?" I tried my best, "I'm really stubborn" look, one I'm quite good at, mind you. He just sighed, probably chalking it up to my quirky personality. Oh, Henry, if only you could smell what I smell. But he kept pulling, and eventually, we moved closer. I stayed stiff as a board, ears straining, sniffing with the intensity of a crime scene investigator. The smell coming from that alley was wrong. It was a sickly sweet stench, mixed with sour notes of something half-rotten. And as we edged closer, I swear I heard a shuffle. Something just beyond our sight, crouching in the dark. That's when my survival instinct kicked in, and I did what any sane bulldog would do. I planted my paws, barked like a lunatic, and refused to budge. Henry looked at me like I was crazy, but thankfully he decided not to push it. We turned around and headed home, but I kept glancing over my shoulder just to make sure whatever was back there wasn't following. I'd love to say that Henry finally realized that my instincts are sharper than his own, but of course, he just shook his head, calling me paranoid under his breath. Fine by me. Let him think what he wants. I know that Allie's hiding something, and if my barking keeps it from creeping closer to us, then I'll keep barking till my voice goes hoarse. Every dog has a moment when they know they're not alone, even when they can't see anyone around. For me, that night came last month. It was one of those nights when the air felt thick, like something was holding its breath, waiting. Henry was asleep in the bedroom, and I was keeping watch in the living room, eyes half closed, nose working overtime. Suddenly I caught a scent, something sharp and metallic, like rust mixed with smoke. I shot up, eyes darting around the room. There was no sound, no visible movement, but I could feel it, a presence, lurking just out of sight. My muscles tensed, every hair on my back standing on end. Something was wrong. Without thinking, I started growling, low and steady. I knew Henry would probably yell at me to quiet down, but I didn't care. Whatever was in our apartment needed to know that it wasn't welcome. I moved around the room, sniffing each corner, every dark shadow. The scent grew stronger as I neared the window. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the smell vanished. It was like someone had flipped a switch, erasing all traces of it from the air. I kept sniffing, hoping to catch one last whiff, but there was nothing. The room was still, quiet, empty, or so it seemed. When Henry finally stumbled out of his room, groggy and annoyed, he gave me a look that said, "Really, Frank? Again?" But I knew what I'd sensed. I may not know what it was, but I was sure it was real. There's a reason dogs bark at what humans can't see. We know things that are just beyond your perception. And whatever had visited us that night, I was ready to keep it out. Henry shook his head, mumbling something about ghosts, with a chuckle as he scratched my head, oblivious to the very real threat we'd just had. I leaned into his hand, but my eyes stayed on the window, watching, just in case. Now I'm a tough dog. I'll take on whatever Brooklyn throws my way. But when the lights go out and the apartment plunges into pitch darkness, let's just say I'm not thrilled. One night last winter, just as Henry and I were settling in, the whole building lost power. And I'm not talking about a flicker here or there. I mean full-on blackout. The hum of the refrigerator died, the heater stopped, and our cozy little haven turned into a dark, silent void. Henry was fumbling around trying to find a flashlight, muttering about the great timing of the blackout. Meanwhile, I was on high alert, ears swiveling, nose working overtime. When it gets that dark, everything else seems to get louder. Every creak and shuffle in the building became amplified, echoing through our walls. And then, I heard it. A faint shuffling sound, coming from outside our door. The fur along my spine prickled. It wasn't like the usual footsteps we'd hear from neighbors. This was something slower, more deliberate. Whoever, or whatever was out there wasn't in a hurry. They were lurking. I let out a low, menacing growl. Henry, still searching for that flashlight, didn't even notice, too busy grumbling to himself. I wanted to bark, to send whatever was out there running, but I held back. This was no ordinary intruder. I could feel it, a sort of cold, creeping sensation that made me want to keep my growl low and steady, as if to warn the thing outside without fully giving myself away. Henry finally clicked on the flashlight, the sudden beam cutting through the dark, and he turned to look at me. "What's wrong, Frank?" he asked, as if he hadn't been ignoring me for the last 5 minutes. But before I could answer, not that he'd understand me, of course, the shuffling stopped. Silence. The presence outside was gone. Henry shrugged and wandered back to the bedroom, taking the flashlight with him. I, however, stayed by the door for the rest of the night, just in case. Call me paranoid if you want, but I wasn't taking any chances. Not on my watch. You'd think with all I've been through, I'd be immune to surprises. But Brooklyn always has a new trick up its sleeve. One night, just when things seemed peaceful, I caught a movement outside our living room window. Now, we're 3 floors up, so naturally this was suspicious. It started as a faint shadow, shifting against the wall. My nose twitched, picking up a faint whiff of something oily and strange. Henry was sprawled out on the couch, oblivious, eyes glued to his laptop. But I wasn't about to let my guard down. I trotted over to the window, sniffing and staring at the shadow with laser focus. At first it stayed still, like it was testing me. But then it moved again, closer this time, and I let out a bark that shook the walls. Henry jumped, his laptop almost crashing to the floor. "Frank, what's wrong with you?" he hissed, clearly annoyed. But I didn't care. My bark turned into a growl as the shadow seemed to slink away, disappearing into the night. "Just a raccoon or something," Henry muttered, rolling his eyes. But I knew better. Raccoons don't have that oily, almost metallic smell. Whatever it was, it had been watching us. I could feel it in my gut. And trust me, a bulldog's gut doesn't lie. Henry eventually calmed down, muttering about my overactive imagination. But even after he'd fallen asleep, I stayed up, keeping one eye on that window, just in case. I'd learned that the night held things Henry could never understand. If I had to spend my life barking at shadows to keep us safe, then so be it. For a dog, smell is everything. It's how we read the world. Henry doesn't understand it, But when I catch a whiff of something unusual, it's like reading a headline in one of those newspapers he brings home. I know when a smell spells trouble, and lately there's been a scent hanging around our building that I can't shake. It started showing up in the lobby. A sharp, acrid smell with a hint of something burnt. At first I figured it was just the neighbors with some weird cooking experiment. But then, one night I smelled it again, only stronger, right outside our apartment door. My instincts flared. This was no ordinary odor. It was too invasive. I pressed my nose to the door crack, sniffing as hard as I could. The smell was intense, almost stinging, like smoke mixed with something bitter and metallic. My mind raced. Could it be a fire? But no, there was no warmth or crackling sound. It was something else, something hidden but undeniably wrong. Henry, as usual, was oblivious, casually scrolling on his phone in bed. I started to bark, not caring if he found it annoying. "What's up, Frank?" he asked, looking up with a slight frown. But before I could give him any more of my best warning barks, the smell faded. It was there one moment, gone the next, like whoever or whatever was out there had just slipped away. Henry gave me a quick pat on the head, telling me to take it easy, but I knew better. That scent wasn't just passing by, it was looking for something, or someone. And if it was planning to come back, it'd have to go through me first. A week later, around 3 in the morning, I heard it, a faint scratching sound at the front door. My eyes shot open and I froze, ears straining to pick up every tiny noise. This wasn't a creak or a floorboard settling. This was deliberate, rhythmic, like someone trying to be quiet but failing. My heart pounded, every muscle tensed. Slowly, I got up from my bed and moved toward the door, nose twitching, eyes narrowed. There it was again, a subtle scratch, then a soft click. Someone was messing with the lock. Whoever they were, they had no idea they were about to meet the wrath of Frank the Bulldog. I let out a bark so fierce it shook the whole apartment. Henry shot up from bed, stumbling out into the hallway, looking at me in bewilderment. "Frank, what the—" he muttered, rubbing his eyes, but I didn't stop. My barks were relentless, each one a warning. Whoever was on the other side of that door wasn't welcome, and I was making it crystal clear. There was a pause, then hurried footsteps retreating down the hallway. I kept barking until I heard the footsteps disappear down the stairs. Henry, half asleep and completely clueless, gave me a bewildered look. "You're really on edge tonight," he mumbled, patting my head as if I'd just been barking at thin air. But he didn't know what I knew. He didn't feel the chill in the air, didn't smell the faint trace of sweat and fear that still lingered by the door. As Henry went back to bed, I stayed by the door, keeping watch until dawn. I knew whoever it was would think twice before coming back. After all, that's the beauty of having a bulldog on guard. No intruder, no stranger, and certainly no lurking shadow would get past me. After that night, things were quiet. Too quiet. I know Henry probably thought I'd scared off some harmless passerby, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Each evening as the sun went down, I'd get this twinge of unease. I couldn't put my paw on it exactly, but the air felt heavier. The noises in the hallway seemed sharper, closer. I'd park myself near the door every night, lying down with my head on my paws, ears on high alert. Henry thought it was funny at first. Frank the Fearless, Brooklyn's best guard dog, he'd joke, patting my head as if I were just playing a game. But this was no game. Something was out there, I could feel it. One night, as Henry was getting ready for bed, I caught a whiff of that acrid smell again, the same scent that had crept around our building before. This time, it was mixed with something sour and unpleasant, a scent that made the fur along my spine prickle. My senses went into overdrive. I let out a low growl, signaling to Henry that something was off. He paused, looking at me with a half smile, probably thinking I'd gone into overprotective mode again. But I didn't care. I couldn't relax. I prowled the apartment, pacing from the door to the windows and back, making sure every corner was secure. Henry sighed, muttering, "All right, Frank, you win," and double-checked the locks on the door and windows. But he still didn't get it. For him, it was just a lock. For me, it was the only barrier between us and whatever was lurking out there. As Henry finally climbed into bed, I took my usual spot by the door, keeping watch through the long, silent hours. I knew that sooner or later the calm would break, and when it did, I'd be ready.